As an environment artist, my role is essentially world building and all that that entails. So I create assets, materials, and textures. I own locations as a whole, and I take elements from white box through to the final art, which can be seen in game. Along the way, there is a ton of iteration that takes place, feedback from the relevant people in order to really push the storytelling aspects of the environments that we make. And of course, because we are working in games and making games, everything has to relate to player interaction. So, other parts of my job involve liaising with other departments such as design, lighting, VFX, and AI slash characters in order to take locations forward and to elevate them so that they are as interesting and as interactable as possible for players. The great things about environments art is that your day to day very rarely looks the same depending on the stage of the project that you're on. So, one sprint, I might be whiteboxing a few locations, another, I could be working on and finishing an asset, as you said, or down the line, I could be set dressing an existing location with already made assets. So, depending on the studio and how things are run, there can also be review or feedback sessions on any given day. So, that, whether that's with your art director, with the design team, or maybe in just amongst yourselves as a peer group, as an art team. So I think it's safe to say that whatever you are doing on a given day, it involves a lot of collaboration between multiple teams, open discussion between multiple people, and that's all just to make sure that the final result is as polished as it can be. I'd say that the biggest lesson I've learned is that I've had the privilege of working with a lot of great people in this industry, and the one commonality that I found is that your coworkers or your colleagues will appreciate genuine interest and enthusiasm more than, a work robot who can get the work done and out the door faster, but isn't particularly pleasant to work with. So I think that a lot of artists, especially juniors, trying to land their first industry role, they worry a little bit about the speed at which they're working, and that can also result in quite a little bit of imposter syndrome due to that. So I would say that at the end of the day, you are given enough time to complete your task. There are producers in place who are very good at their jobs, and their job is to handle the overarching time management side of things. So, ask for more time if you need it. And as a matter of fact, ask any questions that you have. Don't be afraid to, bother that senior or that lead. Their job is there to make your life easier and for you to learn from them. So I think, open, honest communication is a very big lesson that people need to learn. The art is almost sort of secondary to that, as long as you are being forthright with your communication and trying to do your best. The art will always come together. That's what the feedback processes are there for. So I would say focusing on yourself and your soft skills, I think that's very important. So I think software comes and goes to a certain extent. For example, with like the modeling packages, I don't think you really need to place much stock in them. I was a Blender user. I have been a Blender user my entire life, basically, up until I started working at Cloud Imperium, where we use 3ds Max. So I don't think it's a case of you need to know every software under the sun. I think you can get comfortable with one and sort of learn the fundamentals and then transition to into another, because working in games we tend to move companies over the course of our careers. So don't get too attached to a certain software, like a modeling software, because you are probably going to have to learn another one. I think the biggest misconception in working in environment art is that I think people from the outside maybe think that you work in a bubble, a little art bubble, and that you're quite removed from the other processes going on in game development. Well, I've often found that actually the opposite of what is true. So oftentimes you can't just make nice looking art and call it a day. There's a lot of work that needs to be done for making good art that is readable, from multiple different angles or times of day. You need to have like correct material responses, and form and silhouette all has to be taken into account. And this is also with a player that is in your environment, looking at it from multiple different angles. So all of these things need to be taken into account so that your players can really immerse themselves, as well as other considerations which are important for games. You might have a good looking table that you've spent, 2 weeks on making, but how does it affect the player? Can it be used as cover? Does it have physics enabled? How does all of this affect the level design and the block out? So those are all questions that need to be asked, and it gives a little bit of an insight to the sort of symbiotic nature of game development, so to speak. So that is what I would say is the biggest misconception of getting into games, how different game art, optimized 3D game art is from something like traditional illustration or concept art, for example. You just have to be very willing to take on feedback. That's essentially the job that you are applying for, because for the rest of your however many years in the industry, you're going to be getting feedback in some or other manner. Most of the people that I know who very quickly decided that they wanted to get a games industry job, those people that get into games the quickest dropped all sense of like ego and pride, and they just took on feedback. They were willing to make the changes for their portfolio, and they really just immersed themselves in that sort of world. It's also a case of you need to work on an industry portfolio. Take a look on ArtStation, see what's out there, get an idea of the quality benchmark that you need to be at, especially if you're aiming for a certain company, your Ubisofts, your well-known large AAA companies, cater your portfolio towards them. If I'm reviewing a portfolio for a job applicant, I'm not very likely to go ahead if I see a stylized portfolio, for example. So, make sure that you have environments on your portfolio. Some props and materials can be fine as well, but at the end of the day, an environment artist job is the larger picture, so it's always good to see that a good, focused, catered portfolio. The biggest contributing factor to my own self-learning journey was Discord communities, something that I didn't even know existed. There are so many communities that are well established for environment art, as well as new ones that are popping up all the time. So for example, I have Discords like Experience Points, Beyond Extent, Dynasty Empire, the club. They're all great places to join and learn and grow, and each one does things a little bit differently, so you can really find somewhere that you are comfortable and settle in, or you can ask for feedback amongst all of them. I think that's where you make your real genuine connections with people. Most of the industry contacts and opportunities that I've got to this stage were through close friends that I've made through Discord. I think it's just that level of, as I said, genuine connection, which makes from naturally forming bonds with people instead of your generic LinkedIn message or reaching out to recruiters that way. So yeah, I think those communities are really helpful.